Imagine this. It's January 30th, 1968. Across South Vietnam, millions are celebrating Tet Nguyen Jan, the Lunar New Year. A fragile truce is in effect. Families are together, fireworks are planned, and for a brief moment, there's a sense of peace in a country ravaged by war. But this peace is a deception. Under the cover of celebration, one of the most audacious, widespread, and pivotal military campaigns of the 20th century is about to be unleashed. This is the story of the Tet Offensive, the surprise attack that would change the course of the Vietnam War and shatter America's perception of the conflict forever. For years, the American public had been told a consistent story. The war was being won. U.S. military leaders like General William Westmoreland spoke of a light at the end of the tunnel. Enemy forces, the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese Army, were supposedly on the brink of collapse, their morale broken. Official reports and nightly news broadcasts painted a picture of steady progress. The war, while difficult, was on a clear path to victory. But in the jungles and cities of Vietnam, a very different plan was taking shape. Hanoi's leadership, led by figures like Le Duan, decided on a high-stakes gamble. They called it the General Offensive General Uprising. The plan was breathtaking in its scope. Simultaneous surprise attacks on virtually every major city and military base in South Vietnam. The goal wasn't just to win battles, it was to ignite a popular revolution among the South Vietnamese people, causing the Saigon government to crumble and forcing the United States to finally give up and go home. They chose Tet, the most sacred holiday, believing the element of surprise would be absolute. In the pre-dawn hours of January 31st, the illusion of peace was violently shattered. Over 80,000 North Vietnamese and Viet Cong soldiers emerged from the shadows, launching coordinated assaults on more than 100 cities and towns. The sheer scale was stunning. From the demilitarized zone in the north to the Mekong Delta in the south, the sounds of celebration were replaced by the sounds of battle. Nowhere was the shock greater than in Saigon, the heart of South Vietnamese and American power. In a daring raid, a small team of Viet Cong commandos breached the walls of the U.S. Embassy compound, a symbol of American invincibility. For 6 terrifying hours, they held a section of the grounds, engaging in a fierce firefight with American military police. Though the attackers were ultimately defeated, the psychological damage was immense. If the U.S. Embassy itself wasn't safe, where was? Simultaneously, attacks raged across the city. The presidential palace, the national radio station, and the main airport all came under fire. The fighting was street to street, house to house. The carefully constructed image of a secure capital city had been completely demolished overnight. Further north, the ancient imperial city of Hue became the scene of the longest and bloodiest battle of the entire offensive. For 26 brutal days, North Vietnamese forces held the city. U.S. Marines and South Vietnamese troops had to fight to reclaim it one block at a time, through the historic citadel and the narrow streets. The fighting was savage, reducing much of the beautiful, historic city to rubble. After Hue was recaptured, a horrifying discovery was made. Mass graves containing the bodies of thousands of civilians, officials, and intellectuals who had been systematically executed by the occupying forces during their short-lived control. The massacre at Hue remains one of the darkest chapters of the war. From a purely military perspective, the Tet Offensive was a catastrophic failure for the attackers. The popular uprising they hoped for never happened. The South Vietnamese people did not rise up to join them. In fact, the brutality of the assault, especially in places like Hue, turned many against them. The attackers suffered staggering casualties, with tens of thousands of their best fighters lost. The Viet Cong in particular was so decimated as a fighting force that it would never fully recover, leaving the bulk of the fighting to the regular North Vietnamese army for the remainder of the war. General Westmoreland was technically correct when he declared Tet a major military victory for the U.S. and its allies, but war is fought on 2 fronts, the battlefield and the home front. And on the home front, the story was completely different. For the first time, the war wasn't a distant conflict happening in faraway jungles. It was happening in living rooms across America. The raw, unfiltered images of the Tet Offensive flooded television screens. Americans saw the chaos at their own embassy, the street fighting in Saigon, and the sheer ferocity of an enemy they were told was on its last legs. The credibility of the U.S. government and military leadership was shattered. The gap between official pronouncements and the brutal reality on the ground became a chasm that could not be bridged. The legendary CBS news anchor Walter Cronkite, often called the most trusted man in America, traveled to Vietnam after the offensive. Upon his return, he delivered a famous editorial. He concluded that the war was not winnable and was instead mired in a stalemate. When President Lyndon B. Johnson heard Cronkite's report, he reportedly said, "If I've lost Cronkite, I've lost Middle America." The political fallout was immediate and immense. The Tet Offensive became the turning point. Public support for the war plummeted. The anti-war movement, once on the fringes, gained massive mainstream momentum. President Johnson, facing a rebellion within his own party and a country deeply divided, made a stunning announcement on March 31, 1968. He declared a halt to the bombing of North Vietnam, called for peace talks, and, in a shocking conclusion, announced he would not seek, nor would he accept, the nomination of his party for another term as president. The architect of America's escalation in Vietnam was stepping down. In the end, the Tet Offensive is a profound paradox. It was a crushing military defeat for North Vietnam and the Viet Cong, yet it was also their greatest strategic victory. They lost the battle but won the war for American public opinion. It demonstrated that military victory on the battlefield doesn't always translate to political success, and that in the modern age of media, perception can be just as powerful as firepower. The offensive set in motion the long, slow, and painful process of American withdrawal from Vietnam, fundamentally altering the political landscape of the United States and leaving a legacy that continues to be debated to this day. It was the shockwave that proved the light at the end of the tunnel was, in fact, the headlamp of an oncoming train. Thank you for joining us on this look back at a pivotal moment in history. If you found this documentary insightful, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more deep dives into the events that shaped our world. We appreciate your support. See you next time.